When it comes to roller coasters, there's no better place to ride some high quality ones than Florida. Some people might complain that the good coasters are spread out across every different park around the state, and it makes it kind of hard to take a vacation because it's so expensive to visit every different park. But for locals, it's actually awesome because it means that every park has at least one great ride in it. And as somebody who goes to these theme parks every single day, I have a lot to say about all of the roller coasters around here. At least the ones in Disney, Universal, SeaWorld, and Busch Gardens. So let's start with Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. Unfortunately, it's down for this entire year. One thing that's really fun to do with Big Thunder Mountain Railroad is to ride it during the fireworks, because you just get the perfect view, you're out in the open. But as just a roller coaster itself, it's not the most thrilling, and it is a bit rough. It kind of needed the retrack, hopefully that helps it, so I'll leave it in B tier. Then we have Rock and Roller Coaster. I actually really like this one. One thing I don't really like is that the line just moves so slow on this thing for some reason, and the restraints aren't super comfy either. It looks like they are going to be getting rid of the Aerosmith theming and replacing it with Muppets, which I do think the Aerosmith theming is kind of cheesy, but I don't think Muppets is going to make it any better. Anyways, I'm going to go with A tier. Now, Dueling Dragons. This thing's been gone forever. I never rode it. It was really old. It's going to go in the RIP category. But as for being a dueling and an invert coaster, I'd probably put it around A tier. Now, Space Mountain. I actually think Space Mountain is great. It might be one of the scariest roller coasters in Florida, honestly, because as you're like zipping around, you feel like you're going so fast, and you're also just surrounded by supports. And I swear, I could break my arm on that ride if I really wanted to. And so I'm just terrified of putting my hands up whenever I'm on that. But we'll stick it in A tier. Next we have SheiKra. This is over in Busch Gardens. It's a great dive coaster. It's really smooth, and overall just a pretty good time. I'm gonna put it in A tier, maybe above Space Mountain actually. And then there's Cobra's Curse, also at Busch Gardens. This one's a pretty fun family coaster. Not a whole lot to say about it, but it is fun to get going backwards and get some spinning in. I'll probably put it in the A tier as well. Alright, now we have Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. Now this is a very interesting coaster. Before I ever rode it, everyone just kept telling me about like, which song do you want to get? And I'm like, what does it matter? Like, I just want to ride the coaster. But after doing it about 18 times or so now, I will say that this is my #1 favorite coaster in Florida, but only if I get Everybody Wants to Rule the World or Iran. If I don't get those two songs, then I just leave disappointed, and so it's not my favorite, but it's still going in the top of S tier. And if you haven't ridden this thing, some people will claim that it's just a glorified Space Mountain that's a little smoother and spins, but I feel like Cosmic Rewind is like what the future of roller coasters really is. Just the fact that you're like flying through this huge warehouse and there's giant screens everywhere and lights. I mean, I've never seen such a big roller coaster that immersed you the entire time you're in there. Like, it is understandable why this was the most expensive roller coaster ever built. There's a reason that it was on virtual queue for over 2 years, because everybody wants to get on this thing. I mean, people are pooping their pants waiting in line. Now we have Rip Ride Rockit. Now, I'm gonna say something pretty controversial about Rip Ride Rockit, and that is, this might be my favorite ride in all of Universal. Now, it is not the best ride in Universal. There's a difference. Objectively, Velocicoaster has a way better layout, but what I think makes this coaster so amazing is that, for one, it is sitting right in between the two Universal parks. And you get that vertical lift hill where you get tons of time to just look out across all of the parks. And if you do it at night, especially like during Mardi Gras or Halloween Horror Nights, I've even ridden this thing like while there's a concert going on like right below me. And if you're listening to Sandstorm, it basically feels like you were riding a roller coaster through a rave. I mean, I am a little biased because I only ride this thing at night, but this ride just feels like a party every time I get on it. But I can fully understand why people hate on it. It is a bit rough. I have found that row 1 and 4 are smooth, row 2 and 5 are like okay, and then row 3 and 6 are pretty bad. I mean, these trains feel pretty awkward, especially with the track. There's like some really sharp turns that can be really uncomfortable, and it can get a bit rattly too, but I think that because you only have a lap bar, then I think that makes it a lot more tolerable than an over-the-shoulder kind of ride. But with all that being said, I'm still putting it in S tier, because I still think it's one of the most fun experiences I've had on a roller coaster. So I'm not about adding music to it, I think just really helps. I think more coasters should do that. Next up we have Revenge of the Mummy. I'm gonna put this in A tier, right after Rock and Roller Coaster. Now with the Mummy, I really do like the dark ride parts of this, but the roller coaster part is a bit uncomfortable. Like I was saying with Rip Ride, how the turns are just way too sharp sometimes, and so it just does not glide very smoothly. And I think I could say that the Mummy was probably the closest I've come to being injured on a roller coaster before, because there's a part where it launches you up a hill and then immediately jolts you to the side. And I wasn't expecting it, so I'm like, I'll put my hands up, and there's like these bucket seats that come around your waist. And during the jolt, I just like bent right over it, and the seat, I thought I broke a rib. Like, I was in so much pain for the rest of the ride, and I was just like worried that something bad really happened there. So yeah, be careful putting your hands up on that one for a different reason than Space Mountain. Now we have Journey to Atlantis. You know, I really want to put this in A tier, but I'm putting way too much in A tier. Let's put it at the top of B, and let's also move Cobra's Curse down to B, actually. Now, Journey to Atlantis is technically just a water ride, but it does have like a surprise coaster part to it. I have heard that it used to be a lot better, and it has been watered down a little bit. But it's still a pretty fun ride when it's open. Ooh, now we have Mako. Now, I can confidently say that Mako is my most ridden coaster in Florida. I honestly think Mako is like the perfect B&M coaster. It is perfectly smooth, the capacity is great, so it never has that long of a line. The restraints are super easy and comfy. And the best way I can describe the ride experience is just skydiving, or maybe like jumping on a giant trampoline, because every time you go up and over a hill, you're just lifted out of your seat, and then you just get to experience falling. There's so much airtime on this thing, and it is so smooth. It's pretty common for me to show up to SeaWorld on like a Sunday night. There's hardly anyone left in the park, and there's still like 2 hours until they close. And so I'll just go get on Mako and see how many times I can ride it. And usually there's about 20 or 30 people there, just like trying to ride it over and over again. But it's also really cool when I ride this at night is that I can usually see Magic Kingdom's fireworks off in the distance. And while you might think that a ride like this would get boring after 100 rides, sometimes it's interesting to just try riding it in different ways. Like if the fireworks are going off, just spend the whole ride trying to watch them. It feels really weird to be like going through a roller coaster while you're like paying attention to something else. All right, next up we have Manta. Now, again, I'm gonna put this in A tier. Now, flying coasters are very unique, and Manta is a very great, smooth flying coaster. I mean, it's not quite as intense as like Tatsu over in California, but overall it's really solid, and that pretzel loop will still knock the breath out of me. Although this one does get pretty uncomfortable. I've never ridden it more than once in a day. I think marathoning it would get painful pretty quick. Another issue with Manta is that because it's such a complicated coaster, the ride operations always are just really slow. Now we've got Montu, which I will say it is great for a B&M invert. However, I hate over-the-shoulder restraints, and so I can't put it any higher than B, but it is a good B. Invert coasters are pretty cool, but the problem with it is that if you're not sitting in the front, you pretty much can't see anything that's going on. Because in a normal coaster, you can, your head is on the top and you're seeing over the heads of other people. But on the invert, your head's still on the top, but you're trying to see below everyone. So like you're just kind of blind if you're not in the front row. Now it's time for Expedition Everest. I probably would have put this in S tier at one point, but I'm gonna knock it down to A tier, just below Rock and Roller Coaster. Now Expedition Everest really is a great ride, but one thing that makes it really great is that the single rider line is almost always just empty, and the exit is located like right next to the single rider entrance. So this might be one of the most re-rideable coasters anywhere. And since it's the only thrill ride at Animal Kingdom, it's pretty common that whenever I go there, that's kind of all I do. I'll just ride it like 6 or 7 times until I get sick and then go home. Although one day I bumped into a few people who were in the single rider line who were doing what they called a Yeti challenge, where it was just ride it as many times as possible. So they'd been there all day, riding it over and over again. So I was only there for like the last hour, and so I got in like 6 rides. But those guys got like 40-something rides that day. So clearly it's a common thing to just be marathoning this coaster. I would say that this is probably my 3rd most ridden coaster, after Mako and Rip Ride Rockit. Next up we have Sand Serpent, which is also dead now. It was just a basic Wild Mouse coaster over at Busch Gardens. I didn't get on it, but I've ridden Wild Mouses before, and they're all kind of the same. It wasn't a big deal. Icebreaker. This is actually one of my least favorite coasters at SeaWorld, and I can't really explain why. Like, it's got some good launches to it, but like after the launches, it just kind of like whips you around in like uncomfortable ways. The restraints get a little bit tight. I don't hate it, but I'm probably just gonna put it in C. Now we have Velocicoaster, widely regarded as one of the best roller coasters in the world, and it definitely deserves that title if you are really into like hyper aggressive, like whip you everywhere kind of roller coasters. It's definitely an S tier for sure. There have been times where I said that it was my all-time favorite coaster. I don't know, maybe I'm just getting old, but stuff like Velocicoaster just like, it's so intense that I just feel exhausted after riding it. It takes a lot out of you. Meanwhile, I've ridden Rip Ride Rockit like 6 times in one day, so I don't know what I'm talking about. I think it's more just because Velocicoaster always has a long line. I have never seen Velocicoaster be like a walk-on. But then we have Iron Gwazi, which is very similar to Velocicoaster, and I'm gonna put it slightly above Velocicoaster actually. Now Velocicoaster does have better theming than Iron Gwazi, but Iron Gwazi is just like insane. I mean, Iron Gwazi feels like it's Mako combined with Velocicoaster, because it takes you up 200 feet, and then it gives you like the steepest drop, and then you just have way too much speed for all of the twists and turns you're going through. I mean, this thing feels like you're riding a bull. Like, this thing feels like it's trying to eject you off the train. But at the same time, it's still like kind of a smooth ride, and it's not that painful. There's actually a guy over in Tampa who rides this thing like over 100 times a week, and he just hit 10,000 rides on it, which, I mean, understandable to dedicate your whole life to a roller coaster. I mean, who am I to judge? But then we've got Cheetah Hunt, which is also a Busch Gardens. You know, Busch Gardens has some really great coasters, honestly. And I'm going to put this one in A tier, probably just ahead of Manta. Now, Manta is more intense, but Cheetah Hunt is just kind of more fun. It just kind of takes you on an adventure through a safari. It's relatively smooth, but it is kind of showing its age sometimes. And the line for this one is always brutal. Gwazi, not Iron Gwazi, regular Gwazi. Again, this one's dead. Long before I ever came here. From what I heard, it was a really rough ride and nobody really liked it anyway. Then there's Harry Potter and Escape from Gringotts. On paper, this sounds like a really awesome coaster, but it's just not that exciting. In fact, I'm going to put it in C tier. It's just that it's trying to be a dark ride and a roller coaster. It starts you off like with a lot of speed, but you only get about 5 seconds of roller coasting before they arrest your momentum. So it's just like you want to get going fast, but it just doesn't let you. It spends way too much time looking at screens, and any ride with 3D glasses, I mean, I'm glad we're kind of moving on from that these days. But overall, like, I'll still do it. It's still kind of a cool ride, but it's definitely not a thrill ride. Now we have Slinky Dog Dash. Oh, there's so much I could say about this one. Mainly that I haven't ridden this one. Okay, hear me out. I've been to Hollywood Studios 16 times in the last 6 months. It's actually my least visited park. But what you have to understand is that I am a 30-year-old man, and this coaster always, and I mean always, has at least a 45-minute wait. Usually it's more like 90 minutes. And that is no ordinary hour-long line, because that is an hour-long line with just 8-year-olds. And I'm not about to stand there trying to look patient while surrounded by little kids for an hour so that I can go on this little coaster. I'm sure it's a decent ride. Just by looking at it, I would probably put it in B tier. But unfortunately, I've never seen the wait time less than 30 minutes, and therefore I have not braved the line quite yet. I will get on it soon, eventually. Maybe when I'm with somebody. Okay, moving on, let's do Kraken. There's actually 3 coasters that I would put very similar. There's Kraken, Hulk, and Kumba. They're all B&M Twisters. Now, Kraken is a little different, I guess, because it's floorless. And I would actually say Kraken is the best of the 3. I'll get to that a little bit later. But let's just throw Kraken after Montu. Yeah, that sounds about right. Montu is better than all 3 of them. But let's also look at Hulk at the same time, because, like I said, they're very similar. Now, the reason I would put Hulk below Kraken is just that it's just too intense. I mean, like I was saying, I hate over-the-shoulder restraints because you're usually spending the entire ride just like trying not to bang your head around. And so I'm more focused on trying to not get hurt than I am just trying to enjoy the ride. But also with Hulk is that for the first like few elements, I'm desperately trying not to gray out. I mostly only ride Hulk anymore is just to like try and build my coaster tolerance because this thing is just painful all the way through. But yeah, it has happened to me before where on Hulk, I gray out for like the first 15 seconds of the ride. And then we'll throw in Kumba as well. I honestly don't even know how to compare it. It's been a while since I've ridden Kumba, and now it's been closed for a while too. But I guess I'll just put it after Hulk because I do know that it is a bit more rattly than both of the others, but I don't know, maybe I'm wrong on this one. I'm not super confident on that. Now we have Pterodon Flyers. I don't like that this ride exists because Islands of Adventure is a very busy park, and they decided to throw in a ride that has a maximum capacity of 170 people per hour. Therefore, they will refuse to let any empty seats go. Therefore, you have to have a little kid in the front seat and then somebody else in the back seat. Meaning if you don't have kids and you're not willing to talk a stranger into giving you theirs, you're just never going to ride this thing. So, of course, I haven't done this one. But then it was also down for like a year, and not very many people noticed because, like, even when it's open, hardly anyone gets to ride it. I mean, it does look like kind of a cool little thing to just cruise around the Jurassic Park area. But yeah, I just don't think it fits a park that gets this much attendance. Next up, we've got Scorpion at Busch Gardens, which recently just closed down, and it's probably going to get demolished soon. I actually did ride this one, and it's not bad. Actually, where I moved from Salt Lake City, they have a coaster that's almost identical to Scorpion. Theirs is called Colossus. And I've ridden Colossus more than I've ridden any Florida coaster so far. Okay, now we have Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure at Universal Orlando's Islands of Adventure Resort. You know, it's a bit more of a mouthful than just like Maverick at Cedar Point. But this ride is maybe a little better than Maverick. Maybe, maybe not. I mean, it definitely goes into S tier. Definitely above Rip Ride. But again, this ride just kind of has an issue with always just having the most ridiculous line ever. I used to try and get into single rider whenever I could, but now that's gone. Maybe they'll add express and then I'll get to ride it more. But I mean, Hagrid's is just a really solid, comfy launch coaster. There's definitely a trend lately with like mid to high tier family coasters with launches that get way too popular. And Hagrid's is the perfect example of that. I guess like thrill rides are only for the most extreme, and then kids rides are only for the other end of that. But then these family coasters are kind of just good for all ages. So you just have way more people getting in the line for them. And one funny thing is I kind of compare Hagrid's to Expedition Everest in that I feel like Hagrid's is just the launch version and Everest is the lift hill version. But they both have like very similar theming elements, and like you go forwards and then you stop and then you go backwards. You go through caves and stuff. So I actually like them both in a lot of similar ways. All right, time for Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. Now, you know how I was just barely saying with Hagrid's that these like faster family coasters are way too popular? Well, Seven Dwarfs is also that. Let's just throw it here. I think it belongs, it's a little better than Big Thunder, I guess, but not as good as most thrill coasters. But Seven Dwarfs has the same issue that Slinky Dog has, in which it's an hour-long line full of just little kids. Surprisingly, I have gotten on Seven Dwarfs twice now, but they were both like during really late nights, and so it's a little bit more tolerable at that time. All right, we're almost through these. This video is probably going pretty long. Let's look at Tigris. I always forget about Tigris at Busch Gardens. It's actually not that bad of a ride. I would have to say maybe like mid B tier. And I know this ride is a clone of like a bunch of other coasters around the country, but I actually do enjoy the layout of it quite a bit. Like, it is very unpredictable, just like how it just twists you around, and you almost like don't know where it's going to take you next. Oh, here we got another big one with Tron. I have a lot of praises for Tron. I'm definitely putting an S tier, probably above Hagrid's actually. Now, Tron is actually very similar to Cosmic Rewind. The quality is probably pretty close. But the problem with Tron is that it's so short. I know that's kind of the cliche complaint about it, but it's like it launches you through some of the greatest theming you've ever seen, and then it's just over, like in an instant. But I mean, I'll still wait an hour for it. I do feel like there are some coasters that are more of like a special occasion kind of coaster, rather than like just a regular coaster. Like Mako, I feel like is just like a casual coaster, because I can get on it and do it over and over again. Whereas Cosmic Rewind is like, maybe I'll do it once per week if I'm lucky. Now we got Flight of the Hippogriff. I mean, Flight of the Hippogriff's kind of just a kiddie coaster. There's not a whole lot to it. It does kind of blow my mind that this thing can get up to like an hour wait sometimes. It is not worth anywhere near that. But whatever, I guess when Hagrid's is 3 hours, you got nothing else to do. Next is Pipeline at SeaWorld, the stand-up coaster. And I do enjoy this one quite a bit, but again, this one just gets like a painfully long line so often. And the main cause of the issue is that Pipeline is just another weird coaster, which results in some really slow operations. Especially since this coaster is pretty strict on not letting very large people on it. And so I see people who can't fit in the restraints get kicked off the ride all the time on this thing. And every time that happens, it's just a long delay because the ride operators don't want to be mean, and so they keep trying over and over again before telling them they gotta go. But it does have like a really interesting feel to it. You know, getting lifted off of your feet when you get airtime, and then even doing some inversions. I'm gonna put this in A tier. We'll put it below SheiKra. But now we've got the new coaster at Busch Gardens, which is Phoenix Rising. I mean, it's okay. It's a kid's coaster. Probably right around C tier. Main issue with Phoenix Rising is that they only run one train. Like, it's not even capable of running more than one. So, good luck getting on it. And then there's Penguin Trek at SeaWorld, which is very similar to Phoenix Rising. They're both actually not too bad of rides, but Penguin Trek I feel is a bit too rattly. Like, it's brand new and it's a B&M, but it still is just more rough than you would expect. And a little bonus complaint I have for Penguin Trek is that the exit makes no sense. You know, most rides you get off the train and you walk right out through the gift shop and then you're outside. But on Penguin Trek, you gotta go through like a long tunnel, and then past a bunch of penguins, and then through some caves, and then into another penguin room, and then into an airlock, and then into the gift shop, and then you can get out the exit. I mean, going out the exit is longer than the ride. And for whatever reason, they won't just put like a quick exit if you want to just leave right away. But that concludes all of the major coasters in Florida. Now, as you can see, I didn't put any coasters in D or F, because I don't think there are really any terrible coasters around here. But I know a lot of you will probably have some disagreements here, so let me know what my most controversial opinion is. I'm guessing it's probably Rip Ride Rockit, but that'll do it for now.